Ed and I and Pat, who's wiring them up now, have actually traveled quite extensively, but that doesn't begin to describe it, because we go to Madrid, that's fine, everything's totally inaccessible, but Ed decided he wants to go to bullfights. This took the most extraordinary combination of every legal skill I learned in Beverly Hills: bribery, manipulation, persuasion, appealing to the macho tendencies of the biggest, strongest Spanish guys we could find. And we finally get Ed into a box, all right? I mean, I don't know, kind of like at the Coliseum, this wonderful box at the bull ring. You know, we're 10 minutes into it, and Ed says, "I'm disgusted, I don't want to see this." Ed Roberts, well, he's reaching the point where people are starting to call him the grandfather of the movement. Ed set up Ed is the first severely disabled student to attend the University of California at Berkeley. Ed is single-handedly responsible for forcing the administration of this school to allow severely disabled students. His orientation is always organization. He is the person who is really the moving force behind the Disabled Students Association at Cal Berkeley. Each of these sort of the first in the world, all right? Ed is the moving force behind setting up Berkeley Center for Independent Living, which is the first center for independent living in the world. Under the administration of former Governor Jerry Graham, Ed was the director of the California Department of Rehabilitation, the same state Department of Rehabilitation that wouldn't give him the money to go to Cal Berkeley because they thought he could never get through. Ed is the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Award, which, for those of you who are not familiar with this extraordinary award, this is the one time Ed's glad he's as old as he is, pays you your age in tax-free dollars for 5 years to sit around and think. Ed is now the co-director of the World Institute on Disability.
You can take up the half hour if you keep on going on with
Yeah,
that. He's endless.
She's cutting me short. All right. I'll tell you my favorite. Everybody's got a million Ed Roberts stories. I'll tell you my favorite short one. I'm putting on Ed as an expert witness, and we didn't have time to rehearse his qualifications, so I'm just working with his resume. And I start into it about 2 minutes, and then I just, every once in a while, even in court, you get silly. I broke up laughing, and the judge said, "What's so funny, Mr. Willis?" And I said, "Well, I'm just looking at this part on the resume which says health," and he's filled in excellent, which tells you everything about Ed's attitude about himself. Ed Roberts.
All right. Well, good morning. After that introduction, I can leave. You're all very important folks to us because you represent to us what we know is an emerging interest. The fact that you're here today and that you're going to take a class that I hope to do the clinic, it's not enough to do the class. You've got to get involved in the cases, and we need you badly. We are probably the most underrepresented of all emerging groups in the society, there's no doubt. It's true. Most people in our society still see us as helpless cripples. They tend to believe that if they were, if something happened to them, and probably will, we decided a while ago not to call ourselves disabled, but we would call everybody else temporarily able-bodied. Because inevitably, we all join us one way or another, whether it's from age, whether it's from car crashes, or any other kind of there's just a lot of ways you can join us. It's not a threat. I guess it's more like a promise. And most people in our society really fear that. God, what would I do if I became disabled? They often look at me and feel pity and sadness. And from the time that I was 14, when and polio, it totally underestimated me. Truly. I mean, what I've had to learn is, despite people's outward appearances, you got to look directly in their eyes to see who they are. And what I've learned is that disability is not just weakness. Everybody else can talk about weakness, but I talk about strength, power. When I came to Berkeley in the early 60s, which was wonderful, couldn't have come at a better time. And obviously I was into politics and joined the revolution and probably got much better training on the outside of the class than I did surely on the inside of the class. I began to understand that there was power in perception of myself. From the time that I was 14, when and polio, it totally underestimated me. Truly. I mean, what I've had to learn is, despite people's outward appearances, you got to look directly in their eyes to see who they are. And what I've learned is that disability is not just weakness. Everybody else can talk about weakness, but I talk about strength, power. When I came to Berkeley in the early 60s, which was wonderful, couldn't have come at a better time. And obviously I was into politics and joined the revolution and probably got much better training on the outside of the class than I did surely on the inside of the class. I began to understand that there was power in perception of myself. Because when people were feeling sorry for me, when people were underestimating who I was, I could get anything I wanted out of them. I could manipulate the hell out of them. So I learned that from the early women's movement. I had the opportunity to go to some women's self-support groups. And I watched women teaching each other how to use the whole concept of femininity and people perceive women as weak. But of course, any of us that know that's bullshit. But I realized that, hey, if women can do that, why couldn't I? And why couldn't people with disabilities do that? Why couldn't we learn to use that as a power and as a strength? I figured it was really not my problem if they had a bad attitude toward me. And certainly I wasn't going to internalize that and feel bad about who I was because they had some rapidly became old-fashioned feelings. And as I began to understand more about who I was, as a person to feel good about who I was, that issue began to reverse for me. I, in the beginning, had a lot of feelings of self-hatred. All these kind of traditional feelings you hear that come from racism, sexism, ageism, handicapism is equally devastating. To be seen as unable because you have a disability is a devastating feeling. But to work your way through it is a strong feeling. And to come out on top of it, feel good about who you are, makes you a very strong person. And what we try to do in the whole idea, or the whole movement around independent living, is empower people. Empower them to use the experience they've had, take control of their life, despite what other people think they will or will not do. To teach people to find your own limits. I was defined when I got polio at 14. immediately went into an IRO. And whenever I asked a question about what I might do, it was always forget it. If it was a question around work, forget it, you'll never work. Sex, forget it. Children, forget it. Well, I had to understand that was their attitude, their opinion. And I had to test the limits myself. So what I found out was, that was all bullshit. One of the proudest things that ever happened to me in my life is I have a 12-year-old son. I didn't know if I could be a father very well. I knew I could have kids, but I wondered if you can't reach out and grab a kid, or you can't, how would I discipline? Turned out, once again, it was a matter of just trying it, doing it. My voice became tougher than a wax. And in many ways, I have an advantage because I don't believe in hitting. I'm very much a nonviolent person. So he was raised without spanking. He's a wonderful kid. Plus, he was raised with all kinds of different people, right? So hopefully he'll wind up not being prejudiced. And going to do that in this society, in this day and age, is not an easy thing to do. I can remember sitting on my father's shoulders, probably, 6 years old, and I turned over, and I saw a woman in a wheelchair who obviously had cerebral palsy, or CP, or whatever. She was very spastic. She was moving around. She was fascinating. So I was fascinated by this person. And my father reached up and grabbed me and pulled me away. Think about how many times we've done that to our children. There was no explanation. And what did I think immediately? I thought, if I can't even look at it, it must be something real bad, something to be afraid of. And we set those attitudes up in our children from the time they're babies almost. I never mind a kid coming up to me who's carrying. My entire care was fascinating to kids. My respirator hose was fascinating, and I never mind that at all. But I watch parents who often intervene. You pull their child away, don't explain it might be a little rude, and don't expect me to help handle it at all. I don't know why we set up prejudice in people. But we do it as parents, as people, our children, our cousins, our people around us. Handicappism is the exact same ism as the others. It's something we have to fight together. It's led to horrible language. I was out rolling around as I do a lot, and a neighbor came up to me, an older woman, and she said, "Oh, I didn't know we had an invalid in the neighborhood." You ever saw that word, invalid? What a horrible word. And if you think about the language that's used around disability, all these devaluing words, it's not just, you think about the other isms and the languages, the word handicap. This derivation is from England in the 18th century, when on a particular street in London, they allowed people with disabilities to beg. This one street was set up. They wore caps, and they would flip the cap off and hold it out, handicap. Cap in hand begging. Interesting, huh? So what we had to do as we got into ideas around how do we become independent and take care of themselves. You don't have to be able to move at all to be in charge of your life. You can have had a physical or mental disability and still you control your own life. And unless we expect people to do that, they don't. There's nothing more self-fulfilling than telling people whether they're born with a disability or not, you cannot do. So one of the most important parts of independent living became, how do we get people with disabilities, all kinds, to help each other? And for me, the biggest breakthrough I ever made in my life was reaching out to help somebody else. But in a way, this is a universal truth, isn't it? I mean, we're so self-centered in within ourselves. I thought, for example, that no one had ever been this disabled, and as miserable as I was. And once I broke through that and began to work with other people with disabilities, I began to recognize, first of all, that wasn't true. But secondly, that it was empowering to me to help somebody else. And that's true for anybody in our society. Maybe it's why I hope you will move through this yuppie mentality and realize that things are not the answer to any of our happiness for our future, but people are. And I hope that's the reason you're in law school. Is that you'll make good wage, you hope, but you'll be able to help others. And this is an area where you can really help others. Because we have a new body of law. We have a group of people who are just basic statistics. We know that there are up to 70 million people with disabilities. We don't know. It's approximately between 40-something million. We know that 2 out of 3 people with disabilities are unemployed. A lot based on discrimination. A lot based on the fact that there's heavy discrimination in our society. I've just been hearing some new figures that more than 40% of young people with disabilities never graduate from high school. 40%. So we're dealing with a group that's basically been kept at a very low socioeconomic level. And if you're a woman with a disability, it's much worse. The jobs available, the levels of income are staggeringly lower than men with disabilities. So here you have it. Here's a group that's got everything, right? Racism, sexism, and within the racism, handicapism within that. I mean, you can, sometimes in hiring people, we like to count up how many different isms they have to go through in their life in order to get here. And if they've gotten this far, you know, they're going to be damn strong folks. Well, a whole lot to contribute to themselves and to society. So the principles, some of the principles around independent living were built on that. Reach out, use peer involvement, a lot of peer involvement. Always remembering that the bottom line is integration here. Just like with other groups, our bottom line is integration. You think about the special ed, special education, all the special things that have been set up around disability. All the institutions, all of which segregated us. The outrageous ideas that at the early turn of the century that people who were mentally retarded, who now are choosing to call themselves people with cognitive disabilities, they were put in state hospitals because of our fear. Somehow they would pollute the genes for society. This is very sexual issues here. So we felt if we took people and we segregated them, put them in institutions, we could keep them from breeding, is the words that were used in those days. And we could keep people from, we can normalize them, which is outrageous. And we know from movements before what happened in the past, that you cannot do anything by segregating people except build the kind of differences that you actually want to minimize. So our big fights you're going to hear about integration in education. You hear about a case this afternoon in Sacramento. But it is law integration is. And yet the school district spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire attorneys to fight it. So we trained the parents, we trained people with sexual issues. So we felt, we took people and we segregated them, put them in institutions, we could keep them from breeding, is the words that were used in those days. And we could keep people from, we could normalize them, which is outrageous. And we know from rumors before what's happened in the past, that you cannot do anything by segregating people except build the kinds of differences that you actually want to minimize. So our big fights you're going to hear about integration in education. You hear about a case this afternoon in Sacramento. But it is law integration is. And yet the school district spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire attorneys to fight it. So we trained the parents, we trained people with disability. It is your right. We don't have enough legal people to help take these court cases into court. This one. Get involved in the clinic. We need you. We need you right now, not next semester. We need you now. It's nice to be needed, to be fair. It'll get you not only physically and wear you out, it'll get you emotionally involved again. And I'm sure many of you have been emotionally involved in other issues, but this is a great issue. Independent living, as a part of that, really has become a whole part of the civil rights movement. Because as we began to recognize that we had to set up our own programs, basically, to get around what was happening, as we watched what the charities were doing to us. For every group of disabled, there's a charity. I don't know if you saw, but last weekend, Jerry Lewis saw, he's a jerk. Just so you know that. He probably already felt that he was a jerk, but I just... I mean, he needs that label. He's a jerk. We fought him for a long time because he refused to put any of the money in the community into independent living ideas. But thinks it all should go towards the cure. It's a big issue with us in terms of charities because the cure is nice, it's important, but if we wait for it, we don't live our lives. We've got to get on with our lives. And too many people are sitting at home waiting for it. We've got to do both. We've got to encourage our government to continue to do research, better research. Whether it's the issue of AIDS or whether it's the issues around a lot of the disabilities that we see every day. It's government's role to do that. Why do we have to go out and collect $40 million to research muscular dystrophy when in that process we destroy a lot of the newer images that we're trying to portray? What do? They hold up a child with a disability. What makes you give money? Guilt? Fear? All of those are the issues we battle every day in our lives. They don't talk about the positive aspects of what happens when you have a disability. They play on your emotions. And it works. They get money from it. But it creates an incredibly stigmatizing atmosphere around our lives. So the legacy of these charities is they've raised money. They've divided us because every little charity has every disability has its own charity. So one of the things we try to do with independent living was bring all of us together. All disabilities, all ages. It's not so easy. Coalition building is a difficult job. But it's taken hold in this country, and you can really feel with the Americans with Disabilities Act. For the first time, we began to see our potential power. Because not only do we bring all the disabled together, physical and mental and all the communication issues, but we also brought together lots of people without disabilities. If we believe in integration, we believe not only in working together, but working with everybody else. And breaking those barriers down, not only within ourselves. First, you got to get over all the self-hatred levels. Once you get beyond that, we become more and more empowered. Then we got to get over our own prejudice toward non-disabled. It's a very interesting one. And we have to move beyond the narrow confines of expectations. And we are. We're doing it. And it's really encouraging. I've been involved long enough now to be able to celebrate the triumphs as well as to see the problems. I've also been involved long enough now to realize that if we talk about disability, we get real serious. Boy, there's no more serious issues than this. Yeah, I see all these faces out here, and it's pretty funny sometimes, let me tell you. It could be like anything else in life. The predicaments I've been in, whether I was whitewater rafting, since then, the tear on my face, it was true. They took the photo right before I was looking at this about 12-foot hole I was falling into. And I was terrified, but I'd never give up that experience. I won't do it again. Well, you know, like anybody else, you test your limits. You figure, I went on a Class 5 river, you know, real heavy river. You know, I had to jump into the heaviest. I'm going to smoother river next time, I think. But there are very few things that I've found that I cannot do. And the latest thing that I'm doing is karate. And you go, well, how can you do karate? Come on up here, let me show you. Literally, some of the discipline that I had to my disability applies very directly to karate. Plus, my wheelchair is a formidable weapon, to say the least. If somebody comes up to me and attacks me in the street, they're in a lot of trouble. It's going to be very interesting to have the whole role reversed and this criminal attack them. It seems to me that that's what we have to do. You know, we have to begin to break those issues apart and figure out ways to do whatever anybody else does. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and play football. I'm probably, although this is like a tank, I imagine it would be tough to tackle me. So once I was tackled, I'd only be down a long time, I think. Who knows what people can do? As long as we have positive expectations of what people might do, people are going to go out there and challenge society. The racers, the athletes are going to say, the wheelchairs, the guy who climbed up the side of you, half over Yosemite. These are all people who are getting to test the frontier of the old attitudes toward disability. And this independent living movement that now has almost 300 centers around the country and 150 more internationally is really starting to take off. And I think the reason it's taken off is because it works. It finally puts some perspective into the old attitude and the old things that people have been denied. And the only way it's going to change, really, attitudes, because architectural barriers are they're going to fall. The new law is very clear, and it's going to take a while, but it's changing your attitudes, and my attitudes, and other people's attitudes toward disability. And the only way to do that is to get to know people with disabilities. And to get over those old stereotypes and fears you may have. But I hope that there's one thing that comes out for every one of you in this class. It's that you confront issues like life and death. We have to. I confronted it at 14. Heavy. I'm not very afraid of death anymore. Once you make a decision to live, you go out and hopefully do the best you can with what you've got. And Then you get into the disability with everybody's low expectations. And you heard the story of, I was immediately declared a vegetable and wound up being an artichoke. This is my favorite vegetable. And that's what we have to do. We have to make choices for ourselves. I stayed in 5 years because I was terrified that if I went out, people would stare at me. Because I had such a bad feeling about who I was. In the 5th year, I got kicked in the ass by my mother. So I had no more important person in my life than my mother. Because we had to rebuild images, both of us. She was the person who her mother came to after I got polio and said, "It's your fault. You see how wicked you've been?" You know, you don't think that would happen, but it happens every day. You know, the old line is, sins of the mother are visited on the children. And as much as you don't believe that, it's a devastating thing to have happen from your parents or anybody else around you. So we had to work together because she was one of my primary helpers. We had to learn how to fight together. And I was 14, and we had to learn from what people were saying. Sometimes the word "so" was not acceptable. I went to graduate from high school, and I'd been a terrible student before polio. I mean, I was a jock, an athlete into it, totally. And I went from that horrible student to an A student. I had a lot of time to study and began to realize how much better it is to be considered smart than dumb. Get away with a lot more. You learn. It just feels better, doesn't it? And it was my time to graduate. I was a top student. This is Burlingame High School. Do you know where it was? Across the peninsula. And I was told by the principal I could not graduate because I had PE and driver's training. So my mother, of course, immediately said, "Well, you'll prop up behind the wheel and I'll drive." And we knew that we threw the superintendent of school came over to tell me this. And he was sitting there. He looked at me and said, "Now, Ed, you would not want a cheap diploma, would you?" Patronizing as hell. And I said, "Sure, get the fuck out of here." We threw him out. Oh, it felt good. It really felt good. With the school board, I graduated, obviously. But everywhere you go, you run into people with their rule books. And they say no. And what's the most important thing to learn? One of them is how to fight for yourself. And very important to win those fights. Saul Alinsky was a great organizer, and probably is the strong and the greatest sexist around anywhere. Said if you're gonna organize, win your first fight. Figure out things that you can do that are relatively simple to help you organize because you win. And luckily that one was a winnable thing. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't won those first few fights. The next fight I had was I was sitting in a theater and told there was a fire hazard. Oh. That still happens. Unbelievable. We have to sue people to deal with that. And we often have to deal with the fire department. How would you like to be called a fire hazard? Well, I stayed there, and I thought about it, and they left me alone. And now, when they build theaters, they put seats, openings, in places around the theater where you can sit. At first, they only put one opening. And we began to find out, well, what if we're with our wives, or our kids, or what if we're with someone else? So then they began to put a seat next to it. Then they began to open it up a little more. And So much of what we do is re-educating people to think about what life is all about. And so much of what we have to do is to get people to understand that when we talk about what a person with a disability needs, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want and need? What do we want and need? For work, we feel good about our work, what we do. Want to have friends, right? Everybody else. The more that you can become oriented, the more that we become oriented to asking that question, the more we will stay away from special this, segregated that, and the more we'll begin to realize what we're dealing with are just people. People first who have disabilities. And my whole life does not revolve around my disability. And I laugh and I play and I have a great time, as much as hopefully anybody else or more. So let's begin with a consensus that what we're dealing with are people just like you, just like me. And as we attack the system, if we don't attack it, it won't fall. Let's attack it from the point of view that we are they, you are me. And the more people we can get out and help fight, the more people to become our fellow lawyers, professors, whatever it is, the more likely that we'll shed these old attitudes and really create equal opportunity for people. But in this field, we got a long way to go. Because the fact that 2 out of 3 people are unemployed costs us $300 billion a year in productivity. Amazing. And yet we tolerated this to go on for so long. It's also amazing. But it's those of us with disabilities, while we may be seated or we may be on crutches or blind or deaf or labeled some horrible names, we're the ones that are going to help lead us out of this wilderness. And in doing that, we're going to create a new society along the way. First of all, we're going to prove that equal opportunity is possible in this context. And we can take an oppressed group and move into sunlight and get people jobs, the old age. I have a feeling that what we're working on together is a profound change in this society, and maybe one of the most profound society has ever seen. When that next person who's been relegated to mental hospitals and to state hospitals for the mentally retarded, when they come out and join us as workers and friends, then I think we will make one of the most profound changes our society has ever seen. And that's my dream. That's my vision. And how to get there, you all are going to be key. I hope you take the challenge. I hope you don't get plans. I hope you get involved in cases and watch what it does. It'll change us. And that's what the future should look like for all of us. Let's do it together. Let's make this change together. Let's create opportunity for a lot of people who aren't living much of a life now to have quality in their lives. Thanks very much.
We're going to take the person who's on your schedule as the next speaker, and that's going to be after lunch. So before, we have some questions for Ed. Surely there must be a few. I mean, this is the recipient of the MacArthur Genius. When you get a chance like that. Questions? observations?
Inspiration?
Yeah. What do you think? Think he's full of it?
Good.
You can say that too.
You know, I wake up every day with a lot of energy. When you think about disability, you think about sickness, low energy, it's not true. But there's nothing in the world like having a cause. And I've got a cause.
I'm not a law student, I'm a teacher. Kind of out of place, but I'm interested in what you're talking about having the kids integrated into the classroom. And as much as I'd like to see that, I wonder how I as a person am going to deal with having a kid in the room, say in a wheelchair, and my room isn't big enough, and I don't have somebody else in the room to help this kid in the bathroom, I can't abandon the other 30 kids, and things like that. Is the law accommodating for an extra person to be in the room to help me out that way? And
Well, it is, if you make it that way. I mean, I'll tell you, the school district will do as little as it thinks it has to.
I second that one.
And boy, they will fight you. And this, you'll hear case after case as you get into reading some of these, where the school district has spent in opposing a student becoming integrated in the school more than it would have cost for that student to go to school for all the way through college. They're a right. These children have rights. And those rights are often denied. And often the parents don't even know that they have a right. Certain things, in fact, the school district's trying to make you feel guilty about it. It's exactly what you said. Oh, well, it's going to. What about the rights of the other children? Why do we have to have children compete for rights?
in my mind, it's more just not that they're competing for rights. I'm one person, and I can only deal with
But
so
you can
much.
do a lot. You know, what I'd really like to see, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're actually going to have a whole panel this afternoon.
Right, you're going to hear more about this.
Just, this is exactly that. I hope you stick around for the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just say, our partner, Arlene and my partner, Diane, has just finished a
Yeah, great
fair
case.
hearing procedure on an important case like this.
Sacramento.
There's this terrible law firm on the other side called Hitler Mendelson. It's Littler Mendelson, whatever. They've had 3 lawyers on the case, and there is no question. I mean, what Ed said is not an exaggeration. That with what they have spent on legal fees alone on their side, all right, this kid, to keep the kid out of the classroom, this kid could have been accommodated all the way right up through college. Linda, who's our other partner sitting here, handled the case against Vallejo School District where the student got a service dog to assist her, went through all the rigorous training program, and then the school has a million excuses about why it won't let the dog in. You know, somebody has an allergy, etc.
They also spend about themselves.
The bottom line is discrimination. And the bottom line becomes you've got to fight it. The law is relatively clear. I mean, this case, the Sacramento case, has the case where we're talking about very severely disabled people being integrated and what it does for the other children, not just for them. In fact, we're so interested in this issue that we get concerned because it's like the old days. Remember when one black person would go to college? Or 2, that's what's happening in our schools. You have 1 or 2 disabled children, and often they're isolated and alone, and they lose their own identity as having a disability. So as we become more successful, we're realizing that not only we have to fight and push integration, but we also have to make sure there's support groups for these kids as they appear, as they get so involved.
What is the World Institute main program right now?
The World Institute on Disability is a policy center, policy and research center. And what we try to do is change the direction of policy in the country. So one of our major issues we have 18 different programs, but I'll tell you one, which is the issue of personal assistance. Reed, sitting over here. Reed, this is Reed Stewart. Reed is working on his master's degree at JFK, but he's also my attendant, my the person who comes in and gets me out, got me here today. And he does all the physical things for me that I can't do for myself. And if you're deaf, you need an interpreter. If you're blind, you might need a reader. If you have a severe cognitive disability, you might need somebody who can help you interpret language and information that you and I can take at a certain level. These are a new kind of person that's becoming invaluable and key to many people's independence. And that's probably our major program. We're working on issues of long-term health issues. And we need a national personal assistance program in this country. And we're going to get it. But to do that, we thought we'd have a peace bonus, right? Well, conveniently, this thing in the Middle East just jumped up and took what we thought would be a peace bonus and kind of turned us right back into all this militaristic bullshit. But what we're going to do is we're going to have to organize every state. The independent living centers are taking the lead, and we're going to create a personal assistance program nationally that will allow people to get out of their traps in their homes, or out of institutions, or out of places where people have no future, and that assistance, that attendant is going to be the one that helps us move out and puts us in control of our lives, not was it done by somebody else who's taking control of our life. Jerry?
Yeah, what kind of, you've traveled, of course, all around the world.
Yeah,
I'm particularly interested in what kind of differences in terms of discrimination that you've seen as you've traveled across this country.
Across the
A lot
country?
of us who have disabilities coming here to the Bay Area, they think this is the place.
It's a little different here in Berkeley, but they just do the Berkeley schools around integration, so it's not terribly in one. What I find is that discrimination is the same everywhere in the world. Now, for example, in India, under part of the Indian religion, you're a chosen person. But that doesn't mean much. You're chosen to beg, basically. The discrimination is exactly the same all over the world. It's incredibly safe. The unemployment rate of 2 out of 3 is almost exactly the same all over the world. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes a little bit lower. Countries like Sweden, where we've heard kind of the utopias, it's bullshit. They're not at all. If you're disability, you're just likely to be unemployed and to feel bad about who you are. In Sweden, you're much more likely to get the kind of equipment you need, and you're much more likely to get personal assistance if you need it. But you'll also be pretty much segregated. This is a worldwide movement. There's no question as we get more into it. It's not only that there's some differences state to state, but there are also differences, some differences internationally, but the bottom line is the same everywhere in the world. Some countries are even now thinking about, in Africa and Latin America, are the people who are reaching out to are people like Goodwill, and others believe in segregation. And what we fear is that we're going to see special education, segregated schools being set up, and they can't even afford regular schools. So that's policy becomes a real key to how can we move in there and begin to help change those attitudes, and how can we be the people that represent disability more in this country and around the world. We're working on American foreign policy. We do very little in terms of disability around the world. Almost nothing. It's all connected to the military effort. So one of the most positive experts that we've seen is the whole concept of independent living. It seems to cross a lot of cultural boundaries. But this government has not even been involved. Maybe it's better if they're not. But certainly some foreign aid money can begin to go to countries in terms of dealing with disability. And every one of those countries is going to need legal people, and it's going to need folks who can help interpret the law. In fact, Sid's got a very heavy interest in international disability law. Because, I mean, we need, just like here, even though laws have somewhat different bases, we're going to need lawyers, we're going to need students with disabilities to go into law all over the world to help change things in their own country. And that could be a big challenge for some of you who are very interested in international law, because this hasn't even been opened, really. I mean, this is talk about a fledgling approach to law and disabilities around the world. Even though there may be strong law schools, they haven't even thought about this as an issue. Since kind of trying to get them to think a little bit about it and get them to represent people with disabilities in their own country, like as a law school.
Okay. Thank you, Ed.
My pleasure. I come here every year because I know how important these classes are, but even more what the clinics do. See, if my friends who are overwhelming these folks with cases of discrimination. I mean, there are so many that they're having a hell of a time just selecting, because they want to select the cases that will make legal precedent. And that's a party to what we were talking about earlier, which is how underrepresented we are as a group in terms of, the law.
Business is terrific.
Yeah, business is terrific. Yeah, that's good.
Well,